Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to Forging the Falcons. I'm Scott Kennedy. And this is on this side over here. This is Nick Kendall. I'm in Atlanta and he is in Seattle. So we are covering coast to coast your football needs. I've been watching Lucifer again. So I almost wanted to say desires, but it's too early for that. Too early to be saying desires. We are just a couple of days away from going live here. You know, if you're a Chargers fan or a Raiders fan or a Jaguars fan, you sort of went live. You had kind of a soft opening, so to speak, last week. But, we've got preseason football on Friday. So this is the last time we'll do a Forging the Falcons. And one quick programming note is we will be coming to you live on Monday mornings for Forging the Falcons at 8:45 Eastern. I'll get us started, then Nick will join us, and we'll talk some football before we head into Broncos for Breakfast, which also returns next week. So lots going on. Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing well, but I am pretty tired. Picked up some friends at 3:15 this morning to drive them to the airport, and then came back and got a little bit more nap. But the dog was saying, "Hey, how dare you?" So let the dog outside. He came up into bed with me. So been up, kind of up and off for a bit, but excited here. Excited to. It's happy hump day as well. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I got for a walk after the show last night, and my dog was like, he's like, "Oh, I thought we were just kind of going outside." Wait a minute. I got more than I bargained for, after a 40-minute walk. He's like, "What the hell, man?" So, he's getting older. He's 9, and those big dogs, they start getting a little bit of arthritis and stuff. And he's like, "I didn't want to go on a 40-minute walk up and down all these hills today," but it was a nice evening out, and we are good to go. I slept in a little bit after the past couple of days of no sleep, so I'm ready to go, man. I'm fired up. You know who else is fired up in here this morning? Come in and say hello to some folks in the chat already. Ethan, DWI guy, saying good afternoon, gents, over across the pond. Premier League football is back over in your neck of the woods. Excited about that. So good morning. Good morning, EJ. Says good morning, Nick and Scott. Let's talk some football. Absolutely. Mark Schrader here as well. Some of our friends on Facebook are starting to pop in. And remember, super chats on YouTube and Facebook stars on Facebook are ways you can help support us and help us do bigger and better and more things like adding shows because of support from guys like you. Stars are available on the Facebook page now. Albert, good morning. Jeremy coming in. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick and fellow Forging the Falcons. And my dog, EJ, says, my dog is the only reason I get my 1,000 steps a day. EJ, I'm going to let y'all in on a little crazy secret. I said I was going to stop talking about this, but I can't help it. I have an insane streak going of 10,000 steps and then 3,000 calories. So 10,000 steps and 3,000 calories to my Fitbit that is going on 5 straight years without missing a day. So yes, that is insane. And last night at 9:30, I got out because I'd been sitting on my butt much too much and had to get out and get my extra walk in at 9:30 at night. So yeah, habit forming, says motivation gets you started, habit keeps you going. And man, I'm a stubborn SOB, so I didn't want to stop. So let's lead off here, Nick. I want to talk about Roquan Smith, the Chicago Bears, from Montezuma, Georgia, went to the University of Georgia. So all of a sudden, there starts becoming some, and the Chicago Bears ties. If you've been following the Atlanta Falcons transactions move over the last 14 months, every single player they brought in has a tie to the Chicago Bears. So it all starts making a little bit of sense. Roquan is a talented player, even if he might not be at a huge position of need. He's requested a trade. Bears, Falcons, talent. What do you think?
I mean, if he wants to come to Atlanta and can kind of force his way back home, where he has, you have a little bit more leverage, then I think it makes more sense. But this is a double-edged thing with Roquan, where you're going to be competing against a lot of other teams that are going to want to have him. I'm guessing the value of what you'd be sending would probably be about the 40th to 55th pick overall. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give a round 2 pick. It's probably something that can equal that. And the other thing is he's going to be an impending free agent after this season, probably going to get a big contract. I saw a report that he's looking for money bigger than Darius Leonard, who just signed a market shifting linebacker contract as well. So if you can get good players, I think you should call on good players, but does it make sense for where the Falcons are right now? I mean, your defensive line has a lot of question marks. Outside of AJ Terrell, you have a lot of defensive question marks. You're in a position where maybe you need to give up draft capital to go get a quarterback. So it's just a lot of things don't line up unless you feel like you are able to get a better than market deal. You're going up against the Kelly Blue Book, and it's like, oh wow, this is much less than what the Kelly Blue Book says I should be paying. Maybe we should make a swing then.
Yeah, and for some reason StreamYard is just kind of bouncing in and out on my connection, so hopefully it's nice and clear. It sounds good in theory, okay, linebacker, but the Falcons already have a high-priced linebacker that is considerably more than they'd be willing to pay for Roquan Smith and Deion Jones with a $20 million cap hit. They're like, oh, we'll move Deion, and then, we can bring in Roquan. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. Deion, you'd need somebody to pick up about $14 million of his salary this year. That'd be the max that you could recoup. And you're not going to get rid of him for $14 million. One, he had a bad season. He's not worth it. Two, he hasn't been playing because he's injured. So that's not going to happen. So you're going to bring in another $9 million cap hit, which you could actually afford. They've worked their way into a place where they can afford to bring that player in. If they really, really wanted to, they could bring in a $9 million guy this year. They don't really want to do that, and they're not going to try and re-sign him. They're gonna hold their nose and make sure that Deion isn't a huge distraction this year. And if they're going to make a move for a Roquan Smith, it would be next year as a free agent, because then they'll have plenty of money to play with. But again, I still don't think it makes sense. I wrote that up on All Falcons yesterday. I don't think it makes sense it definitely doesn't make sense for this year, Nick. I don't think it really makes sense for this team for next year either. Financially, one, and two, you just put a second-round pick in Troy Anderson. You're okay at the inside linebacker position, assuming that he doesn't just flame out and bust, which, is a possibility, but I don't expect that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, draft prospect, right? Guy hasn't played an NFL snap yet. Injury questions also a little bit coming in. So we'll see about that. But just for where it lines up, there are other teams that I think would be Roquan Smith would be more valuable to them. So therefore, they'd be willing to give up more draft assets. It's the same conversation with the Denver Broncos. Would it be great to bring Roquan Smith if you had extra draft capital this year and you weren't coming up to a Russell Wilson's Draymond Jones / Bradley Chubb contract extension? Yes. But alas, it's not where they are in their, I guess, evolution as a roster building franchise. And we got Kevin Mapp coming in with the Southern Miss Golden Eagles there saying, morning, guys. Good to see you, Kevin Mapp.
Good morning, Kevin. Good morning, coming in on Facebook. Make sure y'all hitting those likes. We only got 2 likes so far. I know we got more watching than that across the channels. Hit those likes on Facebook and shares. Facebook's been good to us lately on the channel. So I don't know why. I don't know if it's their, YouTube has been kicking their butts for content providers, but I've been getting really, really good distribution on Facebook. So please share and invite some more folks in. But Kevin comes in. He says, I say we pass on him because we're not going to get a favorable deal on him. No, we're not. The Falcons won't get a favorable deal. I don't want another 8-figure linebacker. Foyo Oluokun got 8 figures from Jacksonville. He led the league in tackles last year. Roquan is probably a better player. Last year, maybe he wasn't. I don't want another 8-figure inside linebacker. That might be on this team, Nick, might be the last place I would want to invest money in is inside linebacker. The single last place.
I mean, they could use another top 10 pick at the wide receiver spot, maybe, but or another tight end.
I mean, honestly, they could. One more wide receiver. Assuming you've got free agency.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have free agency money next year, and I could invest into my offensive line. I could get another offensive tackle. I could shore up the guard position. I can get another big body on the defensive line. I just got 2 edges last year. I could use a safety in the back end. Okay, so where do I want to use a premium pick? Well, quarterback one. That could be the answer. But also, again, a cost-controlled, talented wide receiver makes sense for a team that is now on the ascension. It doesn't necessarily make sense for one that is careening towards the bottom. Which I do consider 2022 to be the bottom. I consider this to be the floor for the Atlanta Falcons. And then they're going to come out and they're going to have, 9 figures of money to spend in free agency next year, over $100 million in free agency. You're talking $63 million of dead cap money that comes off. You are also talking about Deion Jones will not play on that contract next year. There's another $15 million. So we're up to what, $78 million. Calvin Ridley money could come off completely. I'm already at 90. The cap goes up $10 million and we're at $100 million. I did that easy, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Coming in real quick, Mark Schrader coming in orange. I love it, Mark. Thank you so much for the support, my friend, as always. You're a big reason why we keep expanding, Mark, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Good morning to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything is doing better on the health front there as well. And thinking about you in that regard.
Yeah, and Jimmy comes in. Good morning, Jimmy. How you doing? He says even Cordell Patterson wants the Falcons to sign him. I clickbaited that yesterday, and I felt a little guilty about it. But sometimes in order to get attention, you got to clickbait the headline a little bit. I said Roquan Smith and the Falcon. Cordell Patterson weighs in. All he did was put out a tweet that said, Roquan Smith. That's a tweet, and I would expect him to advocate. They were teammates for 2 years in Chicago. Half the Falcons were teammates with Roquan Smith in Chicago because half of them have played in Chicago. But again, Jimmy, I don't think it makes a ton of sense, honestly. Just for the reasons we just went through. Again, I would rather have another corner because Casey Hayward's getting old. I like Casey Hayward, but I want someone to grow up with AJ Terrell. I'd rather have another safety. Richie Grant looks like he's making that step up, Nick. He's getting some good reviews. Need another one. Need another safety. I would absolutely rather have 3 defensive linemen and another fire-breathing edge. Anywhere across the offensive line that's not named Chris Lindstrom. Another wide receiver would come in okay. A quarterback and a running back. Literally, I would invest everywhere in this team before I would spend investment capital on more. Let me put it that way, Nick. More investment capital on the inside linebacker position.
Kicker and long snapper draft picks coming right up, guys. You heard it here from
Scott. We already locked up Younghoe Koo. I'm stoked about that. He's really good. He's a fan favorite. He's a Georgia-ish boy. I think he went to Georgia Southern. So we're fans. We're big fans of Younghoe Koo around here.
Won a few games.
Dirk, appreciate you coming in. Feels like it's been a little while, but I recognize the Roll Tide and the Chelsea for sure. And tank for Will Anderson. Now that becomes an interesting topic. How well would Marcus Mariota and or Desmond Ridder have to play? And then if they aren't playing well, the Falcons are going to be drafted in top 3. If they're not playing well, you got to go quarterback, right? And if they do play well, there's no way they'll be in position to get Will Anderson, right? So, Dirk, I find it hard for the Falcons to get Will Anderson next year unless they just say, screw it, we'll get a quarterback, a little bit like the Denver Broncos did.
Mm-hmm.
To hell with it. We'll pass on a quarterback this year. We'll go after a vet next year, and we're going to get a guy, a building block type of player like they did with Pat Surtain. They weren't sold on Justin Fields at 9. They didn't take him. They got what looks like a perennial Pro Bowl young cornerback at 9, and then they went and got their quarterback the next year. This isn't going to be a one-year thing, so maybe that is how it happens, Nick.
Yeah, and it would remind me more of the 2019 Cleveland Browns, where it was the Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes draft. I guess they get Watson eventually anyway. But they say, listen, those are guys, quarterbacks, fine, but Myles Garrett, he's different. You see an edge rusher like that maybe once every 5 to 10 years, and he is a chance to be the best defensive player in football for a while. We'll go get him. So I think Will Anderson maybe could be that type of player as well. I mean, his tape is freaky. He is... Honestly, I think he should sit out this year. No offense to Dirk with his Alabama stuff going on here, but he has nothing to prove in my book. Protect yourself. Way more risk being out there. But
it's different now though because they can get money.
Yeah,
So I advocated for that before. You saw it happen in 2020. All these guys sat out, but now they are being compensated. They are earning and. At least earning enough that they don't have to break the rules to buy a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, for their draft stock. Because who was paying for those back in the day? But I won't advocate necessarily for the guys to sit out, the way I had in the past because, some of them are making 7 figures.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the whole Arch Manning thing going on here, but Ole Miss offered him a lot of money, but the Mannings really don't like Lane Kiffin going to Texas, but he's not totally there yet. And Georgia might bump his NIL to $15 million versus whatever it was going to be for a guy who hasn't played a college snap. But hey, that Manning name has some value, I guess.
Hey, good for them. Let it implode. Let the whole thing just blow up the whole damn system. We can do another pod. I actually have a clip. We talked about this for a little while. A clip on my YouTube channel about this. We talked about this on the Broncos one time. Just that, if you can't compete with the NFL, and is the NFL eventually going to say, listen, you guys are paying these guys X amount of money. We're going to remove you have to sit out 3. You have to be 3 years removed from your high school class thing. Just come on. So it's an unholy coalition, and it has been completely non-favorable to the athlete, and it's changing in a big way, and it's changing quickly. Yeah. And Chris coming in here real quick before we put a bow on Roquan and move on to the power rankings. But Chris says, sign Roquan to compete. We need defense to compete. Absolutely. Again, he is a talented player, and you should absolutely kick the tires on a player with local ties, might want to come this direction, and is, it's good. He's a good player for all those reasons. I just think, I think it's in a position that I'm not of the linebackers don't matter, but again, I think the Falcons are okay at linebacker moving forward. If I look at this roster, even if it's Troy Anderson and Rashaan Evans and you throw Deion Jones out the window, you're okay there. There's gaping holes in other places that need to be addressed before I drop $10+ million, before I give a guy $40 million guaranteed to play inside linebacker. They're just getting out of that mess, Chris, with Deion Jones. They have to live with it this year. They can get rid of him next year for a dead cap hit of about $5 million. And when you're at $65 million this year, 5 feels like a dream. I'd rather see them invest their money someplace else instead of dropping 8 figures, which is what it's going to take to get Roquan Smith on a multi-year deal next year as a free agent. And to bring him in this year, he's on 9. And then you'd have to give up draft capital to get him and then pay him 9 for a team that isn't going to be very good. Yeah. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me, Chris. But I'm with you. It's going to be fun as soon as free agency opens in 2023. As this season's over, Terry Fontenot. I mean, they're just sitting there like this, waiting. Money, waiting for that Matt Jones, Julio Jones, Matt Ryan contracts, and Dante Fowler contract for that matter. There's $7 million, I think, of dead money on Dante Fowler sitting there.
Yeah, but just because you have it doesn't mean you should spend it too. Just look a little bit south to the Jacksonville Jaguars and how they spend every offseason with, the most money spent, and they're paying 20% more on a guy than other teams would. So always got to be. Yep.
And the way I see that, Nick, is hopefully they're learning now how to really evaluate, to get value. You're having a Billy Bean Oakland A's this thing right now. Yep. In order to survive, you're having to do extra work on 1-year deals to find guys that can come in and compete. So use that same philosophy, and now instead of a $1 million guy, go get 10 $5 million guys, and restock and get depth across the board. Now the NFL.com came out with their preseason power rankings yesterday, and no big surprise. If you've been paying attention, the Falcons were 31st. There wasn't a lot of analysis there other than, hey, big ups to Dean Pease for at least talking the talk. And I was like, how did I miss this? I didn't see it. Well, this is what they were talking about. Dean Pease, defensive coordinator at Atlanta Falcons, said there's going to be a culture change. 15th or worse, 20th. And what's nice, what warmed my heart to hear it, was all the Matt Ryan haters out there. He's talking defense. He's a defensive coordinator. Now, I'm not, Matt Ryan. I'm somewhere in between. The truth usually lies somewhere in between. I'm not like, it's not all his fault, and it was nobody's fault but his. No. Matt Ryan has his share of the blame for some of the Falcons' past failures, but more of it has to do on a crappy defense that they've had, because Dimitrov wouldn't invest in the defensive side of the ball. So this is what Dean Pease had to say.
We talked about it before and talked about it a little bit last spring, and defense especially. We're changing a culture around this daggone place, okay? And it's not going to be mediocre. It's not going to be average. It's not going to be in the bottom half of the league like it's been 15 out of the last 20 years. Sick of that crap. We got to take charge, and it ain't going to be anybody else to do it but us, okay? I'm tired of everybody telling us how bad we are. After a while, you start believing it. Just like you never tell your children and stuff like, hey, you guys, you get mad at a teacher that says, telling some kid he's stupid, right? You don't ever tell somebody that, because pretty soon they start believing it. Guys around here on defense sometimes believe, hey, 15th is okay or whatever. I've been in the top 10 one time out of the last 20 years. That bullshit's over, okay? Sorry, I'm getting fired up today, but I'm tired of this crap. We're going to change the culture of the defense around this frickin' place. People have got to start talking about Atlanta defense like they did at Baltimore, like they did at New England. It's going to be the same shit around here.
Nick, how do you like that? Are you ready to play now?
Yeah, I mean, if only coaches were the ones that made the biggest difference out there, right? It's a player league in the end.
In the case of the Falcons, Dean Pease probably did make the biggest difference because the personnel last year didn't get better, but they were able to win 7 games because I think the coaching staff was able to make a difference. Now, I want him to instill that same mentality because you're not going to turn over 26 guys on your defensive side of the ball in a season. And there's some, you've got some really young talent there, especially if Richie Grant comes in and starts playing well. Richie Grant, AJ Terrell, Arnold Ebiketie, you get D'Angelo Malone. Grady Jarrett's going to be there for a few more years. You got Troy Anderson. There's some building blocks. I just whipped off 6 names.
Yeah.
Right there. That could be some building blocks of this defense. It could be a core playing and learning, because Dean Pease isn't going to be around another 15 years, and learning a Falcons way and turn that into a positive instead of a punchline.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it all starts up front, though, right? Like, this team is still probably a little bit away from being that guy, but you got to develop the young players that you have. Even if they don't become superstars, you can't keep meandering with some of these draft picks and having them bust or just be, mediocre players. And that's just been too often the case for the Falcons over the last 10 years, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and there's been a couple hits, and even some of the hits were flash in the pans. I mean, what's sad is it doesn't take me long to remember who the defensive picks were up high, because there weren't many of them. Vic Beasley was a high round pick, and his 2016 season is one of the main reasons the Falcons made the Super Bowl. They weren't a very good defense that year, and then he goes on a heater and finishes with like 16 sacks. They were a dang good defense for about 10 and a half quarters in the playoffs. They started putting it together towards the end of the year. Didn't have the personnel necessarily to sustain it. But looking at and I'll drop this in the chat. You'll know how I like to make sure we're sharing the love here. If you haven't seen the power rankings in here, got the Atlanta Falcons 31st out of 32 teams. No other reason, like I said, was given. It just says, shout out to Dean Pease, who hears all your pitying takes about the prospects of the 2022 Falcons as having none of it. And then the rest of the analysis is just the quotes of that. Well, it's pretty obvious why, the Atlanta Falcons are where they are. They weren't a good team last year at 7-10. And on paper, they've probably regressed some. You go from Matt Ryan, who is being hailed as the second coming in Indianapolis right now. They absolutely love him.
Yeah.
To journeyman Marcus Mariota and rookie Desmond Ridder.
Yeah. It's they should see some improvement this year on the overall roster side of things, but again, win record loss, I think this is a team that probably overperformed last season, as dark as that sounds. Sorry guys. Given their point differential, given their score in or given their record in 1-score games. So probably you could see about the record being similarly. I guess your big argument is, even if Matt Ryan is a better quarterback than anybody you have now, maybe one of these quarterbacks, because of their mobility, because of their fit, work better with Arthur Smith. And just because you have issues in the offensive line, maybe even if you do take a step back in your overall quarterback play, they better negate the sieves along the Falcons offensive line.
Yeah, you look and you say, okay, where did they get better, so to speak? And this could break down into the depth chart, that we wanted to talk about too. Is they released their first depth chart for whatever that's worth, and the one big change on there was left guard Elijah Wilkinson, journeyman right tackle who wasn't good enough to play right tackle. That's okay. He's got good size. If you can't play tackle, they move. Can't play left tackle, they move you to right tackle. You can't play right tackle, they move you to guard. You can't play guard, they move you out of the league. He's a guard, so he's on step 3. But again, we said through osmosis, there will be an upgrade at left guard, because Jalen Mayfield was arguably the worst offensive lineman in the NFL last year. And I will preface this every time I say it. I don't necessarily blame him. He was an inexperienced 21-year-old kid coming out. He only had 14 starts at right tackle at Michigan. Absolutely built like a guard. It was the right thing to do to move him to guard, but he was an inexperienced 21-year-old kid thrown to the wolves in a position he'd never played. Not never, but not at a high level. Yeah. He wasn't ready for it. He absolutely wasn't ready for it. That's not his fault. That's the Falcons' fault.
Coming off injury too, right? At Michigan. Yeah. So just having to deal with the whole draft process, which isn't real football, the recovery from an injury process, 21 years old. And it's not so much a Falcons issue as in throwing him out there. I mean, it is to an extent, but it's more so the roster itself was in such a position that you had to rely on somebody like that. Like, we don't have, looking around the room, like, where else are we going right now? Like, we have to put the kid in there. Speaks to the issues on the line, which is unfortunate. I mean, typically you see that kind of issue at the offensive tackle position, not so much at guard, which is concerning for what the Falcons had last year on the
and that's what I mean by Falcons. I'm not blaming the coaching staff for putting him out there. I'm blaming the organization for not having a better option than Jalen Mayfield, and let Jalen Mayfield get season this year. So Elijah Wilkinson should be better than Mayfield was last year, and Mayfield is dealing with a little bit of a back issue this year. He's looked poor this season, and Arthur Smith finally came out and said, well, it's not really fair to him because he's been dealing with the back issue. Well, then tell us that. Not that it makes it does make a little bit of difference. Even the guys that try not to be on social media, they're on social media, and they see what people are saying about him, and it doesn't help them. Let us know he's dealing with a little bit of a back issue. I will make the qualification every time I talk about Jalen Mayfield that he had 14 starts and was drafted, was thrown to the wolves too early and was one of the reasons he struggles. Oh, and by the way, he's dealing with a back issue this year. Okay, eventually the excuses aren't going to work anymore, and he's going to be off the team. But for now, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Right tackle, another big hole. Caleb McGarry looks like he's holding on to the spot at over Jermaine Freedy, who came in to push him from the Chicago Bears. Another former Bears player coming in. Chris Lindstrom really talked up Caleb McGarry, but it's hard to really take the evaluation of players on their teammates. They gush. But hopefully he's got more reason than anybody, Nick, to improve this season especially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Will be interesting to see how it plays out. What are you expecting from him this season? Like, what are your baseline expectations before we start to see everything come together here with real football coming up?
With McGarry, I'm hoping for competency, being able to just hold his own, not having to use a tight end to keep your quarterback, to not blow up the plays. And again, I said he's got more reason than anybody is because his 5th-year option was not picked up.
Yep.
Chris Lindstrom's was. So Caleb McGarry is a free agent, unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, and a solid 27-year-old. I think he's 26, 27 years old. 5th-year offensive tackle with his tools, so to speak. He could be in the 10 million range fairly easily. Coming out, get a 3-year, $30 million contract with 20 guaranteed. So when I say that he's got every reason in the world, he's got more reason than anybody to have a decent season. He really does.
Yeah.
Now that didn't work that way for Hayden Hurst last year, which was a little disappointing, Nick. Coming into a 2 tight end offense, Hayden Hurst's option was not picked up, and I thought he had a meh year last year. I thought he was fairly disappointing. So I'm hoping that he can come out and be an average right tackle, an average right tackle. And again, if I can get left guard, if I can get from the worst to merely just not, a little below average, and I can go from bad to average at right tackle. Now there's a competition at the center position with Drew Dahlman and Matt Hennessy, should elevate that position from meh to okay to maybe at least average. If I can get average play across the whole of the offensive line, that will be a massive improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be really interesting to see with McGarry this year. Like you said, last year of his contract, given they didn't pick up the 5th-year option. And I'm guessing even if he plays, slightly below average this season or close to average, there's still going to be a market for him after this season. The draft pedigree, and there are not enough tackles right now. I mean, God, anybody who's watching the Broncos right now probably sitting on their hands, squirming, thinking about, oh my God, Malik Reed is bull rushing our right tackle. That can't be good for our long-term prospects. So even somebody like McGarry, who's been inconsistent, no doubt about that, but has the pedigree, has the frame, probably still going to have a decent market out there for him just because the value of tackle is because scarcity is high.
Well, let's put it this way. I wouldn't trade Caleb McGarry for Calvin Anderson this year.
Yeah.
I'd probably rather have Caleb McGarry.
Yep.
The thing is, they're both fairly young, if I'm not mistaken. I think I looked up Calvin Anderson. He was kind of a younger guy, and Caleb McGarry is 27. I think he's 6'7" plus, 6'8", and has shown flashes. I think the ceiling is better there. Again, so like you're saying, if you look across the NFL at the right tackle position, you could do worse than Caleb McGarry. But when you traded up into the first round to get him, he's been a massive disappointment, literally, because he is huge.
Yeah,
he's been a big disappointment for what he's doing, which is why he didn't have his 5th-year option picked up and will be a free agent. But he'll be in the league next year. I promise you that. He will absolutely be in the NFL next year.
Yeah, somebody will probably pay him a good contract too, just because offensive linemen don't tend, unless there's an injury, of course, but offensive linemen don't tend to fall off until, 33, 35 years old, just because the style of play is as much about having the body type and the technique as it is the athleticism. And again, that first round pedigree. So really, you could argue that he's coming right into what should be his best years in the league. So pulling for him, I know he's an interesting character coming out of Seattle here and playing for Washington. So hopefully he'll be good this year. And I think if you can just, like you said, average at offensive tackle, you'd rather have elite, of course, but it's more important to not field trash as it is to go out there and have to have elite. It's kind of like the Jake Matthews thing. You don't want to pay elite money for average. That's the other thing, but will be interesting to see what he does this season. Falcons offensive line in general intrigues me. It feels like the offense, though, in general, for me, is still a year away because it's all just kind of hibernating, percolating some, waiting for a quarterback. The real story is can they get the defense on track? And you kind of hear that with Dean Peace's interview and whatnot. You got a lot of questionable young pieces there, but you need 2/3, 3/4 to emerge if you want to take that step forward to really contending for a playoff spot in 2023.
Well, and Nick, I don't even think it's a year away, depending on, again, I don't have high expectations for Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder. Whatever you get out of them is kind of bonus. You got a journeyman in Mariota and you got a 3rd round pick in Ridder. I'm not typically drafting my quarterback of the future in the 3rd round. I might get lucky, and if so, great. But that was one of the reasons I was so against taking pass catchers the last couple of seasons. When you're that far away at quarterback, you're not 1 year away. You're at least 2 years away. So it's like, okay, we float this year with a journeyman and, we get by. It's a stopgap year. He's got a 2-year deal, but it's really a 1-year deal because he's got no dead money next year and can be waived for like $2 million. So it's a 1-year deal. If Ritter's not the guy, which you don't expect him to be, being a 3rd round pick, and then you go and you're bad enough to get your quarterback as a rookie, well, then you're a rookie. So now you're dealing with a team that was 3-14, drafting the top 2 or 3 picks with a rookie quarterback the next year. Yeah, you've got some money, you've got some draft picks starting to pile up, but it's going to take at least a year for those guys to come around. And now I'm in Kyle Pitts is beginning his 4th year in 2024 because I've had to blow the last couple of years, and I'm in the 3rd year of Drake London. These guys are tired of getting their butts kicked, and they don't want to re-sign. They want to move on. Anyway,
real quick on that point, though, I do want to say that when you have that situation, you talk about the quarterback not here yet with the weapons. On the other hand, you have what's going on right now with we've talked about them a lot today, the Chicago Bears and the Jacksonville Jaguars, where we're entering year 2 of these quarterbacks' rookie contracts, which is really the bleep or get off the pot time to maximize that value. And looks like we're going to waste multiple years of these quarterbacks because the offensive infrastructure around them is terrible. And then you have quarterbacks on the other hand, Joe Burrow.
There you go. I was just saying, here's your option, but they got to spend. They did get to spend a bunch of money before that.
Yeah.
So they spent probably $300 million in free agency before they drafted Burrow.
Yes, that's true, but it's not just Joe Burrow. It's also Justin Herbert. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, offensive line needed to work, but they did have some offensive infrastructure around him. And then Patrick Mahomes as well. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill are already there, and you are ready to hit the ground running when you get that young rookie quarterback. You're not wasting seasons trying to then find weapons around them where it's, it's going to be year 3 or 4 before they have enough pieces around those quarterbacks to really maximize that rookie contract and evaluate them as well. So I do think there is something to getting those wide receivers in place, especially given, I think, the learning curve for wide receivers in today's NFL in the 7-on-7 era isn't as steep. These guys know the routes. These guys have caught a lot of balls. It's not like they're having to learn completely different games from college to the NFL like we had to 10 years ago.
To your argument, which I will absolutely acknowledge, using the Cincinnati Bengals philosophy is, okay, the way we just went through this, you're talking about Joe Burrow, second year, rookie quarterback next year, 2023. So 2024, you're a contender. If you follow the Bengals philosophy, you're a contender in 2024. Was there a quicker way to being competitive by going a different route and building the trenches a little bit more? Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
No.
So, I guess, part of it is, it just hurts my soul to watch a team get just whipped in the trenches.
Yeah.
It just, I don't care about the wide receivers and tight ends if your lines of scrimmage are trash. I just don't care.
Yep.
And knowing that Matt Ryan was 37 years old and you were going to need a quarterback anyway.
Yeah.
But EJ comes and he says, Kyle Pitts and Drake London will need to carry the offense this year. Can each get 1,000 yards receiving? Yes, they can. I'll let you weigh on this. I actually have, I've written about this a little bit, so I've got some thoughts on this, Nick. But I've been kind of hogging the mic here. Go ahead. What do you think?
I think it's a volume perspective, and I think definitely each of them can get 1,000 yards, especially because if you think of like tight ends getting 1,000 yards, that's rough. But labeling Kyle Pitts as a tight end, I think, is doing him a disservice. He might have as many boundary snaps as Drake London this season, who could have as many slot snaps as Kyle Pitts. So I definitely think it's possible to each have 1,000 yards. This is probably, if they do each have 1,000 yards, there's multiple ways you could look at it. Yay, the offense is going well. Or you're playing catch up in the fourth quarter because the defense is still, missing pieces. So teams are playing more prevent defense, a lot of stuff underneath. These guys are racking up garbage time stats. Also, it's because the lack of other options that need to be pelted with targets. I mean, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, you should expect a lot of targets their way, a lot of opportunity for 1,000 yards. Then you talk about, the extra game, everything, the NFC South outside of the NFC South has some. I take this back. I was going to say NFC South defenses aren't great. That's not true. NFC South defenses outside of the Falcons are actually pretty darn good on paper this season. So, but still, I would only imagine that just how that sets up right now for these two weapons and the rest of the Falcons right now, even if it's not going to be a super duper high volume passing offense, there just aren't other loud, baby birds in the nest that are demanding to be fed like these two, the loudest birds chirping away, probably deserving of being fed these targets.
So yes, I think Drake London and Kyle Pitts can get 1,000 yards. One, that's 60 yards a game. Okay, that's not outrageous.
No.
Two, the worst passing attack in the NFL last year was New Orleans Saints, and I think it was 3,500 yards. So can these guys get roughly half of your yardage through the air? Yeah, they can. And why? For all the reasons Nick just said. Going back and we were talking about the depth chart, if I look at the depth chart at wide receiver, the ones listed at wide receiver right now are Kaderil Hodge. Who? I mean, I don't know who that is, honestly. I mean, I could look it back up and be like, oh yeah, I remember when the Falcons signed him, but I don't know who that is. Backing him up is Geronimo Allison. He was probably a former Bear. Other than that, and then you go down and look, and you got Olamide Zaccheaus. He's a good third wide receiver 3, drop a guy in the slot. got the contract from that Russell Gage had last year. When they picked up his option about 2 hours later, Russell Gage's huge contract with the Buccaneers was announced. That wasn't a coincidence. And then Brian Edwards, good size. Auden Tate, he's listed fourth. Amir Byrd, Frank Darby. These guys are going to get, they're the two options on this team outside of throwing the ball to the backs. So just through volume, we talk about tackles not being a statistic, because if you're playing inside linebacker, you're going to get tackles.
Yep.
Well, you're going to get catches. Someone's got to come up with, even if it's the worst passing attack in the league, 3,500 yards was the worst by some distance. Someone's got to get those 3,500 yards, and these are by far the best options out there. It wouldn't surprise me, Nick. I'm going to have another Broncos take. I already said I'd probably rather take. I'd rather have Caleb McGarry than Calvin Anderson. It wouldn't totally surprise me if the leading receiver amongst Falcons and Broncos was Auden Tate. Not Auden Tate. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh. I was like, okay, I'll take that bet right now.
Yeah, Drake London. I don't know how Auden Tate got back into my mind. Drake London. It was Drake London just purely because the Falcons have two targets, two weapons. Cordell Patterson being a third. He'll get his share, but you're going to turn around and hand him the ball a lot too. They have two targets where the Broncos have 6.
Yep.
So that's probably where I would go. That it wouldn't be a totally shock to me if Drake London was the top as far as receptions and yards go on a combined team.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got Ethan coming in here with the 25 pounds, saying, good stuff, gents. Good stuff to you, Ethan. Good morning to you. He says, looking at the Falcons 2023 cap space, currently 29 under, but can add an additional 36 million by getting rid of Calvin Ridley, Deion Jones, and Marcus Mariota. So about 65 million potentially. Looks pretty healthy. And
and I think it'll be higher than that by the time all is said and done. They don't have a ton of money wrapped up into next year. Their only big money contracts are rookies. Deion Jones won't play on that contract next year. Mariota, if Mariota plays on that contract, that's good for them. Jake Matthews is pretty high. He'll be there next year. His cap hit, he'll probably be restructured again because his cap hit jumps to $33 million. He'll probably be restructured again. Dead cap hit of 33. Chris Lindstrom will get an extension. They will, or a new contract, so they'll find a way to lower his cap number, because he's got a decently. Calvin Ridley again, you want that one to be gone. Casey Hayward, he's got a $2 million dead cap hit. Cordell Patterson will hopefully will stick around. Drake London. So your big ones there are Garrett Bowles. Good Lord, I've got Broncos and Auden Tate. Left tackle to me is the same guy. Jake Matthews and Garrett Bowles are so similar, it's scary.
Yeah.
Jake Matthews at left tackle is a big one. They'll find a way to restructure that, but they've got to find a way to restructure it where it's not a $40 million dead cap hit when he's 35 years old. I mean, they're treating this guy like a quarterback. This is what they kept doing with Matt Ryan, and it just kept getting in more and more trouble.
Got to rip off the Band-Aid at some point. But thank you, Ethan, for the 25 pounds, man. And I hope you're doing well. And appreciate you coming in and supporting the show. Also, we have John Pope saying, I thought we were going to have about 90 million in cap space.
Yeah, it'll go up, John. There's several ways to do that. Just taking a look real quick at Spot Rack. It says estimated cap space 29.8. I just went through 4 moves that will change that can change that and move it up considerably. That Ethan didn't mention, as far as things they'll do, because Chris Lindstrom will get one of those deals where he's on his option year this year. So where is he? Chris Lindstrom, he's got a $13 million cap hit next year. He'll probably make somewhere similar to that. That's really good money for a guard. But they'll structure it so he's got like a $2 million cap hit next year. So they'll find $10 million on Chris Lindstrom's, give him a 5-year $65 million, 40 guaranteed with a $2 million, $3 million base salary next year and spread that signing bonus out. So they will have more money than they've had in the last 6 or 7 years combined.
Yeah. Which is great. Man, that'll be fun to see the Falcons do that. And it does seem like in theory, the sun should be setting on a few of these NFC South teams as well. We all know that teams that are built on the strength of their defense do not have long windows of contention. And the Saints, I think they probably have one of my favorite defenses in football right now, but I'm really curious to see what happens. I mean, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, those are two older players. Marshawn Lattimore is right in his prime right now, but injury history, we know how that cornerback position can be pretty fickle with injuries. So the Saints, I'm not buying in on them long term. Tom Brady has to retire eventually, right? That's got to be one. And then the Panthers seem like they are. I like their defensive infrastructure a lot, but coaching mess, quarterback questions galore. So things seem to be aligning to maybe make a run here. 2022 is not the year. Hopefully you can accept that by now, but 2023, 2024, 2025, there's a crack in the door in the NFC South.
Mark Turner comes in. He says, you didn't mention Patterson and Edwards. I'm assuming you meant on the talk about the 1,000 receivers. I did mention Patterson a little bit. He'll get some receptions too. He'll help chip into that again. If you've got 2,000 yards and out of 4,000, which would still be bottom half of the league.
Yeah.
Though London and Pitts can get 2,000 yards each, and then you've got to find 2,000 yards for the other guys. Edwards has about 45 career catches. I actually expect him, Bryan Edwards, Olamide Zaccheaus, Drake London to be your 3 leading receivers, with Kyle Pitts being your leading pass catcher. And then throw in Patterson in there too, absolutely. But he's going to get the ball out of the backfield a lot as well. So I still believe that Drake London is going to be wide receiver 1 as far as targets and yardage. And then yards from scrimmage might be Patterson again. I think Patterson led the team last year in yards from scrimmage. He'll get the ball in a variety of ways. And then Bryan Edwards could come in somewhere around where Olamide Zaccheaus came in last year. You know, if he can get 40 catches, 500, 600 yards, I think that would be a very good year for him. Last year with the Raiders, he was 34 catches on 59 targets, 571 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he can replicate that in Atlanta, I would consider that a good season for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Will be fun. Will be fun to see how this team shakes out for the Falcons this year with the weapons. Any other news there on the Falcons front as far as some of the weapons? How's my guy Tyler Algier doing? Any news on him, or has he been?
It's been a little quiet. I think they like him a lot. There hasn't been a lot of the talk has been about the quarterbacks, and Richie Grant has been talked about a lot.
Good.
That, and just the offensive line, Elijah Wilkinson taking that spot and Caleb McGarry holding onto it. But Tyler Algier has looked good. But there's not a ton of gushing going on about any of the guys just yet. And real quick
about Richie Grant, do you have any trepidation about him looking well in this time of year? Because let's be real, the pads have just kind of started to come on here, and in training camp and whatnot, the safeties aren't really having to worry so much about the run game. It's the 2-hand touch going on there with the run game, and it's a totally different game for the safeties when they have to think about crashing down and being physical. And that doesn't really translate as much until you start to get into the preseason, maybe the combined practices and scrimmages as well. But is that anything that you're worried about? Because that was always my biggest issue with Richie Grant. Dude did not look like he wanted any smoke when it came to tackling.
That doesn't worry me as much, because I don't worry about him tackling. I worry about his reading and recognition. So I was really high on Richie Grant because of what they were able to do with him in a vacuum at the Senior Bowl, which was a lot of 1v1 type of stuff and coverage where you've got one assignment. Mm-hmm. Where he ended up struggling was the reading and recognition and the understanding of Dean Pease's defense. And having year 2 in that, it looks like he's stepping up. So if the mental game for him starts clicking a little better, I feel good about his physical tools. So that he is getting praise and making plays now puts him a lot farther ahead than where he was at this time last year. Do I still worry about him? Yeah, you got to see it. But I am very pleased, unlike Mayfield, from what is going on with Richie Grant. Richie Grant, for all reports and from everything we've seen, has taken that next step. How high, we'll wait and find out.
Yeah.
but there is at least a positive trajectory where Jalen Mayfield hasn't. That's the one thing. And we talked, Chris, we hit this a little bit. Welcome in, Chris. Good morning. It says, how do you think the running back position is shaping up? It might be Algier and Patterson. We'll see. We'll see how Williams comes in. I always want to call him Bird too. We got a couple of them. Let me see what they had on the depth chart. Was for running back. It was Cordero Patterson, Damian Williams, Keith Smith, and then they put the rookies way down at the end. So Drake London was listed as the 5th wide receiver. Yeah, that ain't happening. And so everybody's talking about the sponsors, and we got to get out of here too. I had that first up, but I wanted to hit Chris because Chris is such a great person for our show. Tyler Algier is going to get his time. Cordell Patterson's going to lead the team in yards from scrimmage, and then we'll see where I mentioned Tyler Algier. We'll see what happens with Damian.
Yep, absolutely. And good morning to you, Chris. Hope you're doing well. And will be fun to see how the running back position plays out. Will be more. I don't know. Do you think Chris, Patterson can replicate last season, or is it now that the hand has been shown a little bit, it's going to be harder for him to duplicate it?
Yeah, I think if he stays healthy, they'll move him around. I think, 600 yards rushing and 600 yards receiving, and he leads the team in yards from scrimmage at 1,200 yards. I think that absolutely can happen. So real quick, let me get us out of here, Nick. We've got to jump over to beckoning the Broncos in the next 3 minutes. But wanted to say thank you to our superstars, our benefactors, Ethan, Mark Schrader, coming in with some supers. Appreciate y'all. And then, if you're in the Metro Atlanta area or looking towards the Metro Atlanta area, make sure you check out Ryan Kennedy Homes. Give her a call. Ask her about a home you may have seen or would like to see. Looking to move on, move up, empty nest, any of those type of things. You want somebody who knows the area very well. Ryan Kennedy knows it very well. Check it out, ryankennedyhomes.com, or send her a text. Give her a call. See what you want to know. She's very knowledgeable. An expert in the area and can help you in the real estate market in the North Metro area. So thank you very much. On that note, Nick, I got to go. What do you think?
Sounds good. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. We appreciate you, and we'll see you tonight on Mile High Insiders and tomorrow morning with another episode of Building the Broncos.
Yeah, and Friday night, we got football. We will be back, programming note, at 8:45 Monday morning, Forging the Falcons, for a reaction and analysis of what we saw from Friday night. Until then, we'll see you next time.